Tenochtitlan, 1519. You are standing on the great causeway that connects the island city to the southern mainland, and the man walking toward you from the eastern road is wearing metal. Not the cotton armor you know, not the wooden and obsidian weapons you have trained against since you were 8 years old. Metal from the neck to the knee, catching the morning light off Lake Texcoco in a way that has no reference point in anything you have ever seen. Behind him there are more men like him, and behind them there are animals the size of large deer but shaped wrong, carrying men on their backs, moving with a fluid power that the ground seems to absorb differently than it absorbs human footsteps. You are 23 years old. You have taken 4 captives in the Flower Wars. You are considered a capable warrior with a promising future. You have never in your life felt the specific sensation currently occupying your chest, which is not fear exactly, but is the thing that lives immediately next to fear. The recognition that the categories you use to understand the world have just proven insufficient. Today, you are going to live the life of a man whose city was the largest in the world in 1519, and whose civilization was gone within 2 years. He was an Aztec warrior, a commoner by birth who climbed the only ladder available to men of his class, one captive at a time, inside a military and religious system of extraordinary complexity and extraordinary violence. He did not survive the encounter with Spain. Almost nobody did. This is not a story about Hernán Cortés or the conquest as Europe recorded it. This is the story of the man on the causeway, watching something arrive that his entire life had not prepared him for. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell me in the comments. Would you have recognized the danger before it was too late? Let's go back to the beginning. You are born in the early 1500s in Tenochtitlan, the island city in the middle of Lake Texcoco that the Aztec people call the center of the world, and that is, by any measurable standard of the period, one of the most remarkable urban achievements in human history. The city holds roughly 200,000 people. Its streets are partly canals, navigated by flat-bottomed canoes. Its central market at Tlatelolco operates daily and handles a volume of trade that the Spanish soldiers who eventually see it will describe in letters home as exceeding anything in Europe. The Great Pyramid, the Templo Mayor, rises at the center of the city in 2 joined towers, one dedicated to the rain god Tlaloc and one to the war god Huitzilopochtli. And on its summit, the priests conduct the rituals that hold the universe in its current operational state. This is not metaphor. This is cosmology as engineering. The belief, held seriously and structurally, that the sun requires human blood to continue rising, and that the warrior class exists partly to supply that requirement. Your father is a commoner, a Matzihual in the social classification that divides Aztec society into nobles, warriors of elevated rank, commoners, and slaves. Commoners farm, trade, and craft. They live in modest houses of adobe brick on the city's outer districts, eat well by the standards of the period, maize in multiple forms, beans, squash, chili, occasional meat from turkey or dog, fish and insects from the lake, and participate in the city's religious life through the neighborhood ceremonies and festivals that mark the Aztec calendar's complex cycle of days. At age 7, you are enrolled in the Telpochcali, the neighborhood school for commoner boys, where basic literacy, religious knowledge, and preliminary physical training are provided. The Telpochcali is not the elite institution. The Kalmikak, attached to the temples, trains the children of nobles and priests in advanced religious knowledge, astronomy, and the refinements of warrior culture. But the Telpochcali is serious. The physical training begins immediately. Running, wrestling, the handling of practice weapons, the specific endurance conditioning that the Aztec military requires. You run every morning before the school day begins. You run distances that increase weekly. Your legs adapt. The weapon you train with is the macuahuitl, a flat wooden club edged with obsidian blades set in grooves along both sides. Obsidian is volcanic glass,
and a fresh obsidian edge is sharper than any steel blade that exists in this period, capable of cutting deeply with minimal force. The maquahuitl is designed not to kill, but to incapacitate. A blow to the legs, the arms, the side, that brings an opponent down without killing him. Killing is not the point. Capture is the point. A dead enemy has no value to the system.
A living captive brought back to Tenochtitlan has enormous value, religious, political, and social. Every captive you take elevates your rank. Your rank determines your clothing, your access to certain foods, your right to certain women in marriage, your standing in the neighborhood and the city. The military system and the social system are the same system. At 15, you witness your first sacrifice. It is not a secret or a hidden event. It happens on the steps of the Templo Mayor in full public view as a civic and religious ceremony attended by thousands. The captive, a warrior from a subject people taken in a flower war campaign, walks up the steps unrestrained. The restraint is not necessary. The cosmology is shared. He understands what his death means within the system as well as the priests do. He is held across the sacrificial stone by 4 priests, while a 5th opens the chest with an obsidian knife and removes the heart, raising it toward the sun. The entire sequence takes less than a minute. You watch this from the plaza below and feel what you have been prepared to feel. Not horror, but solemnity. The appropriate response is solemnity. You have been told since childhood what this means and why it is necessary, and the explanation is coherent within the cosmology you inhabit. The sun requires feeding. The warrior provides the feeding. The captive's death is a form of honor, not a punishment. You believe this because you were born into a world where it is true. In the same way that a child born into any coherent belief system believes what that system tells him is true. You are 15 years old. You have been running every morning for 8 years. Your legs are strong and your hands know the maquahuitl. Next year, you will go to the flower wars for the first time under the supervision of an experienced warrior who will watch you and judge what you are made of. The city hums around you on the water. The causeways carry their traffic. The canoes cross the lake in the morning light. The Templo Mayor stands at the center of everything, its steps still dark from the morning ceremony. Everything is exactly as it has always been. It will be exactly as it has always been for 4 more years. The first time you go to war, you are 16 years old, and the experienced warrior assigned to supervise you is a man named Itzcoatl, not the emperor of that name from a century past, but a neighborhood man, thick-set, with the stretched earlobes of someone who has worn heavy jade plugs for years, and the particular economy of movement that belongs to people who have stopped performing confidence and simply have it. He tells you one thing before the campaign begins. Your job is to watch, to stay close, and to not get yourself taken. Taking captives comes later. Surviving the first campaign is the only objective that matters today. The Flower Wars, Xochiayotl in Nahuatl, are not the chaotic territorial conflicts that European warfare of this period resembles. They are scheduled, formalized engagements between the Aztec Empire and neighboring states, primarily Tlaxcala, Huetzotzinco, and Cholula, conducted at agreed times and locations for the explicit purpose of generating captives for sacrifice. Both sides understand the arrangement. Both sides participate because the alternative is the kind of total war that destroys agricultural infrastructure and disrupts the tribute economy that everyone depends on. The Flower Wars are a sustainable system of ritualized violence. This is what makes them possible to maintain across generations. The battlefield is organized around individual combat in a way that European mass infantry engagements are not. You identify an opponent, engage him, and attempt to bring him down and secure him without killing him. Your maquahuitl targets the legs first, a cut across the thigh that severs muscle and drops a man. Then the arms, if he remains dangerous,
always calibrated to incapacitate rather than destroy.
You wear cotton armor soaked in brine, dried, and layered to a thickness that absorbs obsidian impacts reasonably well. You carry a shield of wicker and hide. You have a supply of throwing darts for the atlatl, a spear thrower that extends the effective range of a dart to roughly 50 meters with enough force to penetrate light armor. Your first campaign produces no captive. You fight twice, lose one engagement badly enough that Itzcoatl has to intervene, and return to Tenochtitlan with the specific shame of a young man who expected more of himself than his body delivered. The shame is not private. Your rank, your clothing, your public standing all reflect your captive count, which is 0. You wear the plain cotton of an uncelebrated warrior. Your peers who took captives on their first campaign wear their achievements visibly. You eat the same food as before and tell yourself that the next campaign will be different. The next campaign is different. You are 17, faster than the previous year, and you have spent the intervening months in supplementary training that Itzcoatl arranged. Specifically, the ground fighting that the first campaign showed you was a weakness. When the engagement comes, you read it earlier. Close the distance before your opponent can use his atlatl effectively. Take a dart across the left forearm that opens the skin but does not reach the bone, and bring him down with 2 strikes to the right leg. You secure his arms with the cord every warrior carries for this purpose. You walk him back through the battle line. His name, you learn afterward through the interpreter, is something in Tlaxcalan that translates roughly as obsidian knife. He is perhaps 25, a capable fighter who had the poor fortune of encountering you on a day when you were faster than he anticipated. He is calm during the march back. You are not sure what to do with his calmness. You expected anger or fear. What you get is a man walking steadily beside you with his arms bound, looking at the landscape with the particular expression of someone who has accepted a situation and is now processing what comes next. What comes next, for him, is Tenochtitlan, the ceremony, the Templo Mayor. You do not watch his sacrifice. You are not required to watch, and you choose not to. This is not a crisis of belief. The cosmology is not shifted. But there is a difference, you discover, between watching a stranger taken by other warriors walk up the temple steps and watching a man whose name you know and whose leg you cut make the same walk. You file this difference in a place where it does not interfere with the next campaign, because interfering with the next campaign is not something you can afford. Over the next 4 years, you take 7 captives total. At 4 captives, your rank elevates. You receive the right to wear a specific cotton mantle with a border pattern that identifies your achievement, the right to drink pulque at public ceremonies, and the right to keep a concubine in addition to your wife. You marry at 19, a woman from your neighborhood, the daughter of a craftsman who works obsidian, whose practicality and specific humor you find more sustaining than the more formally praised qualities the matchmakers discuss. You have 2 children by 22. Your household is modest but functional. Adobe walls, reed sleeping mats, a small courtyard where your wife grows herbs and keeps 2 turkeys, a clay hearth that fills the interior with a thin, permanent smoke. At 7 captives, you are approaching the rank that earns the right to wear the Jaguar warrior's insignia, the spotted cotton suit and helmet of one of the 2 elite warrior orders that sit at the top of the commoner military hierarchy. You need one more significant capture. You are planning the next campaign in the spring of 1519 when the news arrives from the eastern coast. There are strangers. They came from the sea on floating mountains. They have animals nobody has seen before and weapons that make thunder and fire. The initial reports are inconsistent and filtered through several translations before they reach Tenochtitlan, and the Emperor Moctezuma receives them in the palace with an expression that the palace attendants later describe as controlled in the way that great effort is required to control. You hear the reports in the neighborhood, the way most information reaches commoner warriors, through the network of returning traders and the official announcements read in the plazas. The reports are strange enough that your first instinct is to discount the details. Animals that carry men on their backs? A misidentification of something. thunder weapons, perhaps some variety of advanced atlatl, floating mountains, large boats, the kind that coastal traders use, misread by people who had never seen ocean-going vessels. You are 23 years old. You have 7 captives to your name. You have a wife and 2 children, and a household that functions, and a rank that is 1 campaign away from the elite tier. You have never once encountered a situation that your training did not give you a framework for. The strangers reached the outskirts of the Valley of Mexico in November of 1519. Moctezuma sends them gifts of gold and featherwork and food, and the gifts do not turn them back. And then Moctezuma sends ambassadors, and the ambassadors return with descriptions that match the coastal reports exactly, and Moctezuma makes a decision that will be debated for 5 centuries afterward. He invites them in. November 8th, 1519. You are in the crowd on the southern causeway when Hernán Cortés enters Tenochtitlan, and the first thing you notice is the smell. The strangers have been traveling for weeks through the mountain passes and the Valley of Mexico, and they carry the accumulated smell of men who do not wash regularly. A sharp, sour smell that is distinct from the ordinary smell of crowds in a way you cannot immediately categorize. The second thing you notice is the horses. You have heard the descriptions from the coastal reports and from the ambassadors who went out to meet the column, and the descriptions were accurate but inadequate. Nothing that comes through language fully prepares you for the animal itself. The size of it, the sound its hooves make on the stone causeway, the way it moves with a weight and momentum that makes the ground feel less permanent than it has always felt. The man sitting on its back is above your eye level by a full meter. He looks down at the crowd with an expression you cannot read because his face is framed by metal that covers everything except the eyes and the mouth. There are roughly 400 of the strangers in the column, plus their indigenous allies. Tlaxcalans, Totonacs, several thousand warriors from the peoples who have been living under Aztec tribute and who have their own reasons for accompanying this particular group of foreigners into the heart of the empire. You are aware of the Tlaxcalans in the column with a specific unease. You have fought Tlaxcalans in the Flower Wars. You know what capable Tlaxcalan warriors look like in a battle line. Seeing them walk through the gates of Tenochtitlan as allied escorts to the strangers produces a sensation in your chest that requires a moment to identify. It is the sensation of a framework developing a crack. Moctezuma meets Cortés at the end of the causeway, in a ceremony of formal greeting that involves the exchange of gifts, the removal of sandals in the emperor's presence, and a protocol of elaborate reciprocal courtesy that the Spanish interpret through their own cultural lens, and the Aztecs conduct according to theirs, and the 2 interpretations do not overlap cleanly. You watch from your position in the crowd, too far to hear the words, close enough to see the posture of the 2 men. Moctezuma is taller than most of his attendants, dressed in the full regalia of the Aztec emperor, the turquoise diadem, the jade and gold jewelry, the sandals with golden soles that no one else in the empire is permitted to wear. He conducts the greeting with the precision of a man performing a ceremony he has prepared for extensively and is not certain about. The strangers are housed in the palace of Axayacatl, a large compound near the Templo Mayor that belonged to Moctezuma's father. They are given food, servants, and access to the city. Access that they use immediately and extensively, moving through the streets and the market with an observational intensity that you notice from the first day. The Spanish soldiers are looking at everything with the specific attention of men who are calculating something. You cannot read what they are calculating, but you recognize the look because you have worn it yourself on the first day of a new campaign, assessing the terrain before the engagement begins. The thunder weapons are demonstrated for the Aztec nobles on the second day. A metal tube on wheels, filled with some substance that ignites and expels a projectile with a sound like the sky breaking. A sound that has no reference point in any warfare you have been trained for, and whose effect on the body of whatever it strikes makes the obsidian maquahuitl look conservative. You do not flinch at the sound because you are standing in front of people whose opinion of you matters. And flinching is not something warriors do publicly. Inside, you note the information carefully. A weapon that operates at a distance greater than an atlatl, faster than any projectile you have encountered, that penetrates cotton armor without apparent difficulty. You begin revising calculations you had not previously known needed revision. Within 2 weeks of the stranger's arrival, Moctezuma is a prisoner in his own palace, or something close to a prisoner, the situation being ambiguous enough that the Spanish maintain the fiction of a voluntary arrangement while making clear, through the positioning of armed men, that voluntary has a specific meaning in this context. The information reaches the warrior class through the same neighborhood networks that carry everything else, and the reaction is the fracture you felt developing on the causeway. The crack widening into something that separates the men who believe the situation can be managed diplomatically from the men who believe that a foreign force currently occupying the palace district with metal weapons and horses and Tlaxcalan allies at their back is not a diplomatic situation. You are in the second group. You discuss it in low voices with its Quatl, who is older now and whose opinion still carries weight with you. He tells you what he observes. The strangers are mapping the city, counting the causeways, noting the locations of the food stores. They are not guests performing the courtesies of guests. They are soldiers performing the assessments of soldiers. He says this quietly and without drama, the same way he told you to stay close and survive the first campaign. He has the same expression he wore that day. The city around you continues its ordinary operations in the way that cities do when the situation has not yet fully declared itself. The market at Tlatelolco runs its daily business. The canoes cross the lake. The neighborhood ceremonies proceed on schedule. But underneath the ordinary operations, there is a tension that you feel in every conversation, every gathering of warriors in the neighborhood, every glance toward the palace district where the strangers are housed. Tenochtitlan has absorbed invasions before, has conducted them, has expanded through them. The difference here is not the presence of enemies. The difference is the emperor in his palace receiving his captors' requests with the language of hospitality and the body language of a man who does not see a path. In June of 1520, the situation resolves. A newly arrived Spanish force from Cuba, sent by the governor who opposes Cortés, lands on the coast, and Cortés takes most of his men out of the city to deal with it, leaving a garrison under a man named Alvarado. During a major religious ceremony at the temple precinct, Alvarado orders an attack on the assembled Aztec nobles and warriors. Accounts disagree on the specific provocation, but the result is unambiguous. Several hundred of the Aztec elite are killed in the temple precinct. The city rises. You are in the temple precinct for the ceremony. You are not among the dead because you are near the outer edge of the gathering when the Spanish garrison moves, and the movement gives you 1 second of warning that the man beside you does not have. That second is the difference. You run toward the sound rather than away from it, which is the warrior's instinct, and what you find in the precinct is a chaos that the flower wars did not prepare you for. Not the organized individual combat of the campaigns, but a confined space, panicked crowds, metal weapons moving without the rules that make the Macuahuitl's calibrated incapacitation relevant. You get a man out through a side entrance. You go back for another, and the entrance is blocked. The city is now at war. Moctezuma is dead within days, killed by the Spanish according to the Aztec accounts, by the crowd that views him as a collaborator according to the Spanish accounts. A new emperor takes command. The Spanish garrison is besieged in the palace of Axayacatl. You are standing outside its walls with a macuahuitl in your hands and the specific clarity of a man who has been waiting for the situation to finally declare itself. It has declared itself. The night the Spanish flee is called the Noche Triste by the people who survive it, the night of sorrows, though that name is given by the Spanish themselves, which tells you something about whose sorrow was considered worth naming. It is the last night of June, 1520. Cortés has returned from the coast with reinforcements and has spent several days inside the besieged palace of Axayacatl, attempting to negotiate a withdrawal that the city will not grant. When the Spanish move, in darkness, in rain, with a portable wooden bridge to cross the gaps in the causeways, where the Aztec defenders have removed the standard bridge sections, they are heard within minutes. You are on the northern causeway when the alarm goes up. The Spanish column is attempting to cross the western causeway toward Tlacopan, moving as quietly as 400 soldiers, 16 horses, a significant quantity of looted gold, and several thousand Tlaxcalan allies can move in the dark on a stone road above open water. The answer is, not quietly enough. The city responds from the lake, canoes surrounding the causeway on both sides, warriors moving in from the flanks, the specific controlled chaos of a night engagement where the darkness equalizes some of the advantages that metal armor and horses provide during daylight. The causeway fighting is brutal in the compressed, close-quarters way that the Flower Wars never were. The Spanish portable bridge jams at the first gap and cannot be moved to the second, which means the column has to jump or swim the remaining gaps with full equipment. Horses go into the water, men in metal armor go into the water, and metal armor in water is a death sentence that requires no warrior to deliver. It delivers itself. The gold that the Spanish soldiers loaded onto their persons and refused to leave behind becomes the weight that pulls them under. You are in a canoe on the left flank, and the water around the causeway in the early hours of July 1st, 1520, contains a quantity of men and horses and gold that will be recovered from the lakebed by archaeologists 5 centuries later, confirming the night's accounting in sediment and bone. The Spanish escape. Not all of them. Perhaps half the Spanish force and a substantial portion of the Tlaxcalan allies do not reach the mainland. But Cortés reaches the far shore with enough men to constitute a surviving army, which is enough. You watch the column disappear into the darkness of the mainland, and know, with the same instinct that reads a battle line, that this is not an ending. It is an interval. The interval lasts roughly 8 months. Cortés retreats to Tlaxcala, consolidates his indigenous alliances, builds a fleet of small ships designed to operate on Lake Texcoco, and returns to the Valley of Mexico in December of 1520 with a force that has grown substantially. In the intervening months, something arrives in Tenochtitlan that no warrior training addresses and no military decision can intercept. The smallpox comes ahead of the Spanish return, carried into the city through the same trade and movement networks that carried everything else. It moves through a population with no prior exposure, and therefore no partial immunity of any kind. Not the limited resistance that repeated exposure eventually builds, but zero. None. The virus enters a body that has no framework for it and operates without any of the biological friction that slows it in European populations. The death rate in Tenochtitlan during the smallpox outbreak of late 1520 is estimated by later historians at between 1/4 and 1/3 of the city's population within weeks. You watch the city change in ways that the siege never produced. The Flower Wars and the Spanish attack are events your mind can process. Violence has categories, has a grammar, has responses. The smallpox has none of these. People develop fever, and then the skin lesions that cover the body completely, face and hands and everywhere, and they die in their houses because they are too weak to move, and there is nobody to move them because the family members who would do the moving are developing lesions themselves. The Emperor Cuitlahuac, who led the uprising against the Spanish and commanded the Noche Triste defense, dies of smallpox in November of 1520, 80 days into his reign. The new emperor, Cuauhtémoc, young, 25 years old, a warrior of genuine capability, takes command of a city that is burning through its population from the inside, while the Spanish are building boats on the lakeshore. You do not contract smallpox. This is not virtue or strength. It is the blind arithmetic of exposure and immune response, the same arithmetic that decided which of your children survived their early illnesses and which did not. You simply do not get it.
and the people around you who do not get it are exactly as unable to explain why as you are. You watch Itzcoatl develop the fever in January of 1521. You watch what follows. You do not watch the end because he sends you away from the house on the third day, and you understand that this is the last direction he will give you, and you follow it. Cortés begins the siege of Tenochtitlan in late May of 1521. The fleet of small Spanish ships takes control of the lake,
cutting the causeways and the supply lines that feed the island city. The three causeways, north to Tepeyac, west to Tlacopan, south to Iztapalapa, become contested ground, fought over daily as the Spanish push inward from the mainland and the Aztec defenders push back. The city is slowly compressed. The fighting in the streets is unlike anything in your experience. The Spanish advance by demolishing buildings as they go, pulling down the adobe walls and filling the canals with rubble to create solid ground for the horses, methodically removing the urban geography that the defenders use for cover and ambush. Every morning the Spanish advance and tear down and fill. Every night the Aztec defenders clear the rubble and reopen the canals, resetting the ground for the next day. The cycle repeats for weeks, and each cycle costs bodies on both sides, and the city has fewer bodies to spend. You fight in the streets for 75 days. The Macuahuitl in confined urban combat proves more effective than in open field engagements. The Spanish soldiers cannot use their longer swords efficiently in narrow streets, and the obsidian edge cuts through the gaps in armor with enough force to matter. You take no captives. The logic of the flower wars, the careful incapacitation, the cord at the belt, the march back to Tenochtitlan, has been replaced by a different logic entirely. The logic of a siege where there is no back to march to, and the city itself is the last captive anyone is trying to preserve. By late July, the food is gone. The fresh water supply, which came via aqueduct from the mainland and was cut early in the siege, has been gone for weeks. You are drinking lake water, the brackish, increasingly contaminated water of Lake Texcoco, and eating whatever can be found in a city that has been under siege for 2 months and smallpox for 6. There is nothing left to find. You chew leather. You boil and eat the reed mats from the floors of abandoned houses. You keep moving because stopping means acknowledging the arithmetic of what remains, and acknowledging it is not useful. On August 13th, 1521, Cuauhtémoc attempts to escape the city by canoe across the lake and is captured by a Spanish brigantine. The capture is the signal that the city's resistance, the coordinated, commanded resistance, has ended. What follows in the streets is not surrender but collapse, the slow cessation of fighting as the men still standing absorb the information that the center has gone. You are in the northern district of the city when it ends. You are sitting against a wall that is still standing, which is not a given in this part of Tenochtitlan anymore, and the sounds of fighting are receding in the direction of the lake. Around you the street is the street of a city that has been under siege for 75 days. Rubble, silence, the particular quality of air in a place where a very large number of people have died in a short time. The lake is visible between 2 broken walls, its surface flat and gray in the August light. You are 25 years old. You have 7 captives to your name from the Flower Wars, none from the siege, because the siege had no use for the Flower Wars' careful arithmetic. Your wife and children left the city in June to the Tepeyac Causeway during a brief window when it was passable, carrying what the children could carry, going north toward relatives in a lakeshore village. You do not know if they reached it. You have not received information from outside the city since the siege tightened in July. You sit against the wall and look at the lake. The Spanish ships are visible on the water, small, angular, moving with the particular purposefulness of vessels whose work is almost finished. The city that was built on water, the city that 200,000 people called the center of the world, is quiet in a way it has never been in your lifetime. A Spanish soldier finds you an hour later. You do not run. There is nowhere to run to that changes the outcome. And you have understood, since the causeway in November of 1519, that the outcomes available to you have been narrowing steadily toward this one. You are taken with a group of survivors to the edge of the city. Cortés will later record the number of Aztec dead in the siege as more than 100,000. The number is probably an undercount. The city is gone. You were its last working piece. You just lived the fall of one of the greatest civilizations in human history, a fall that took 2 years from first contact to final collapse, and that was accomplished not primarily by Spanish military superiority, but by smallpox, indigenous alliances built on legitimate grievances against Aztec tribute demands, and the specific political fracture that Moctezuma's decision to receive the Spanish peacefully created inside the warrior class. The steel and the guns mattered. The disease mattered more. What I want to know from you is this. At which point in this story did you feel the outcome become inevitable? The moment the horses walked onto the causeway? The night the smallpox arrived? Or the morning Moctezuma sent the invitation? Tell me in the comments. And if this kind of history reaches something in you, subscribe, because there are 100 more lives like this one, and every one of them deserves to be told.